Okay, there we go. And 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1. That's not going through now, so there's that. Wizzy Izzy 1 has followed. That's nice. 24 days ago. Oh, that's my stream. Dashboard. Turn that up. See what we get. There. Now we're audible.
Yay, audible.
There. Now we're audible.
Yay, audible.
Okay. Just a little more. I'm gonna mute this. Because that's a thing. And oh, we can start whenever we're ready. Oh, I should share. This I can share on Facebook to my page. That.
Is it 9 or 12?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to share it online. I have to find it.
Well, I posted to Heresy and Hearsay.
Oh.
Because I'm logged into that Twitter on this computer, so when I shared it from the stream, it went there.
Oh, okay.
So if I go to my Twitter, it should show up. Oh, we were retweeted by Vinod. I will retweet us.
Okay, you've retweeted on your...
From 9/12.
Okay.
Like the funny signs I have on the bench behind us.
Mm-hmm. Back up. There we go. All right.
So whenever you're ready. I mean, if you want to wait till 5:30, we can sit here and bullshit a minute.
So do we introduce ourselves first, or you want to introduce what the podcast is and then introduce ourselves? I like the idea of going. Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
To reclaim reclaiming faith in the context of political discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I am Reverend Barney,
Mm-hmm.
and my co-host, and then you would go from there.
Okay.
Should we give a time frame on the Patreon?
We could have set that up before now if you wanted, but
I'm sorry.
yeah. I think for now, just say.
Follow us on social media, and we'll. Yep.
Stop that. There.
Have you figured out if the Maddow thing's going to play or not?
The what?
The Rachel Maddow thing.
Associated Press. This is incredible. Trump administration officials have been sending babies and other young children. Oh.
Okay, perfect. All right, so. Alright, so let me have a sip of drink and then we will get started. Welcome to welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a political podcast reclaiming faith through context of political discussion. I'm Reverend Barney.
I'm 9 of 12.
And today we are going to be discussing the faith and politics of immigration. Before we get started, I do want to let you know that we will be setting up a Patreon page. If you'll follow us on Twitter at Heresy and Hears 1. Again, that's Heresy and Hears with an S at the end, 1. You'll be able to see our social media, and with the social media, you'll then be able to see when we have that Patreon set up. Again, today's topic is going to be about immigration.
Now, do we want to talk at all about who we are and how we feel like inspired or qualified to talk about this heavy topics? I mean, this is like primary rule, like don't talk about religion and politics. Well, we do, as a hobby and a habit.
I'm a theologian, and I've also been with the Universal Life Church. I have been ordained by the Universal Life Church, but and I have been active in politics since 1992. My first election was of Bill Clinton. I was old enough to vote then, and I had been active in politics ever since, keeping up with politics, the minutia, and the discussions and discourses that go on.
Okay, I grew up Catholic. I got better. I am ordained through ULC many, many years ago. I also had a registered congregation in New York through which I taught classes on theology, on metaphysics, etc., and was legal to perform weddings there. I more recently got in North Carolina when they started refusing to marry gay people. I went ahead and got another online ordination to help do that. My political career has spanned about the last 15 years and that I'd call it a career. I mean, I always voted. I started voting with Dukakis, so, I'm old. But I moved to North Carolina, and I had children, and I wanted to change the world, so I got really involved. I've held various positions in my elected positions in my county, district, and state parties. I helped start the statewide LGBT caucus of the North Carolina Democratic Party. I was elected to be an Obama delegate twice, once in 2008. I went to Denver. I was elected at district level, and in 2012 I was elected at the North Carolina state level. I also served on the DNC appointed committee, our state chair appointed me to the committee to serve on our equal opportunity staff as an LGBTQ rep to make sure that everyone got equal representation in the delegation. So, and I've had paid jobs. I work for a nonpartisan voter identification and information project. I was a state director for that here in North Carolina a few years ago, and I worked for a couple congressional candidates doing everything from being a field op, a field manager, to campaign finance. So I had a little political experience. I taught church school until they asked me to leave the congregation, but that's a whole nother story. So we both have a lot of interest in how political discourse has right-wing strangled these conversations in the context of faith, and there isn't civility to it. And that's okay. We don't have to be civil either, because we have to listen to this all the time. And it's painful, and it's like, no, that's not what Jesus said, or that's not what the Buddha said, or are you just out of your damn mind? You want to hurt other people? That's not what anyone should be doing. So,
and that's the thing is I have been equally growing more and more frustrated by seeing a faith that talked about inclusivity and talked about being compassionate and loving your fellow man being used as a way to beat people down and to hold people down and tell them that they're not good enough. And so I felt that at this point in our lives, we need to be able to retake the faith, not just Christianity, though that is where our particular strengths. Well, yeah, you taught Sunday school, so you were raised Catholic.
But I took philosophy of religion in college and studied anthropology, and I have a much broader view of basically all the religions are right. Mm-hmm. There's a very golden rule: you get out what you put in. We're all part of one divine thing. I'm a pagan Christian, and both those faiths get really mad when you say that sort of thing, but to me, there's truth there. So
I have friends of mine who are Buddhist Christians. So there are some that just meld really well together. And personally, honestly, if you've been to a Catholic church thing, it's almost like a pagan ritual to begin with.
Oh, very! It was some of the best circle ritual training I got was being a minister of the word.
So with that being said, we feel that it's time for us to step up as believers of faith and reclaim the conversation in a compassionate way and show that there is compassion in this, and that the faith is not about belittling. It's about bringing people up. And so this brings us up to immigration. The past couple of weeks, and I want to say that today is the 28th of June when we're recording this and going live, there has been, for the past 2 weeks, there has been a bit of a kerfuffle, putting it mildly, where people are being detained at the border. Most of them are seeking asylum, and they are being if they have children with them, they're being forcefully separated from their children. Their children are then put in detention centers, and then they're put in detention centers with no way or setup on how to bring them together. And in fact, one of our media individuals had to report on a little setup here. She was trying to report on a breaking story of how there was a three tender care units being set up for kids 10 and under. And this is a woman who has been in the business for almost 20 years now. Had her show for almost 10, I want to say. And this is how she tried to report this.
This has just come out from the Associated Press. This is incredible. Trump administration officials have been sending babies and other young children. Oh, hold on. To at least three. Oh. Put up the graphic of this. Thank you. Do we have it? No. 3 tender age shelters in South Texas. Lawyers and medical providers. Just. I think I'm gonna have to hand this off. Yeah. Sorry. That does it for us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Now it is time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell, where he's live in Brownsville.
She broke down in tears talking about how children, the young children, were being separated from their families and being pulled away and put in, as a lot of people have seen pictures, cages. They were put in giant warehouses. They were put in defunct Walmarts. And there had been discussion of how, they have it so much better. That's not the point. They're being separated from their children. They're being taken away. They're being treated less than human. In Matthew, pardon me, in Matthew, Jesus talked about who would be able to go to heaven and who wouldn't. And he talked about how you treated your fellow person is how you treated the face of God. And it was Matthew 25, 35 through 46. And it basically states that when you treat someone good, then you're treating God good. But when you treat them poorly, when you do not do what you're supposed to do as a human being, that is when you are failing God and you are turned away. Jesus said this very clearly. But it's not just that. There are laws that were written in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy stating that you needed to treat your fellow foreigners with respect. Treat them as you would be treated yourself.
It is really interesting. These verses, you chose some Old Testament things. And these are ones that also appear in the Quran. And they're very specific. And some of them, because of the circumstances in which that book was written, are referring to Christians. And when Christians, they are your brothers, we believe in the same God, and this is how you should treat them. And it's like a lot of it is almost word for word, which happens with older books, with the Torah, the Quran, with the Old Testament. And it's something that's been overlooked with Muslim racism and oppression in the last 10 years or so, really badly, is like, no, they just want holy war and it's all jihad. And it's like, man, you should read their book. Because they specifically are charged with treating Christians as their brothers.
Right. They're supposed to treat them well. When they talk about a jihad or when they talk about any type of acts of violence, the only thing that they say is when you're defending yourself, and even then you should you should defend yourself only if you have to. And then basically it goes into the rule that if the rule of maim instead of kill, knock out instead of maim, run away if at all possible. And it's kind of that situation in the Quran and how they discuss that. So their book is not any more war specific than the Bible. I mean, if you read the Bible, to be perfectly honest, it's got a lot of murder, a lot of war, a lot of just wiping out entire cities. So, So it's no more than what the Christian Bible is. And the reason I wanted to use some of the Old Testament stuff is because what we keep getting bantered back to us in other discussions, not just immigrations, but other discussion, is they like to use Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And if you're going to use that book, you have to use all of it. Or you have to grow with the times. And that is what many scholars have discussed. From Jewish to scholars, Catholic scholars, everything. So the book grows, just like our American Constitution. It grows. It originally had 10 amendments. Now, how many amendments are we up to?
Well, I think a more interesting point about that is the context in which it was written. Taking it all together, absolutely right, because those books, because of the way they were written piecemeal and added to over years, are very easy to cherry pick from. And when you pull out of context, no one should ever do that. Like, that's a dangerous way to read anything, and it's completely dishonest and horribly dishonest to pick out something and then use it in a different context and then act like you're righteous with it, like the street corner people do. Growing up Catholic and being a minister of the Word for years, I started reading scriptures out loud in Mass in like first grade. And it took until I was, probably 13, 14, where I started actually reading the whole book instead of just the bits they give you at Mass. And that was a huge, because I was getting interested in tarot cards. And then it was like, oh, you'll go to hell for that. But in another part of the Bible, there's a whole story about divination and summoning by this great holy man, right?
Right.
So it's like, stop doing that. You're missing the overall message in trying to use something literally because you feel like that has more power, but it's dishonest.
Well, and you can't take everything in the Bible literal. And I know that freaks out a lot of fundamentalists, but Jonah didn't live in a fish for 3 days. It is a form of a story to explain the different why you should be following God.
Now, this, to me, if you don't mind, I think this leads very well into a specific thing about this immigration discussion. Okay. Yes, these laws were in place before for a few previous presidents, but they have been used differently over the course of time. Yes, it is new to be the zero tolerance that Trump enacted because there is certain presidential power over the agencies that handle the way these laws already existed. That, yes, like Obama and Bush specifically did not enact a no tolerance, even though this is technically the rule of law, but it was not politically viable. It was not humane, and Trump doesn't give a shit. So we should have. We needed comprehensive immigration reform. We've needed it for years and years, and it gets so stuck on the political, I'm campaigning so I can't piss anybody off, that it hasn't been getting done. Meanwhile, these laws have been sitting there, and people can argue against presidential power is completely out of hand, and it certainly becomes evident when it is used in this manner. But it also has kept these laws, when they were not correctly formed, from being abused this heinously and hurting people until now. Yes, there have been horror stories at the border. It's been happening for a really long time. Just not to this extent that got this attention. And so maybe some good will come of that, but we're damaging and inhumanely treating other humans and children in particular right now in an awful way. Now, Democrats wanted, when we had presidential power, to choose how we enforce these laws, tell HHS what to do, tell, ICE what to do, was making more lax who could pick up someone who got picked up at the border. Right? You're not getting a criminal charge. You're just going to put them on hold for 20 days and then you're going to deport them. But what happens to the kids in the meantime was someone could be called and pick them up. So we tried to make that more lax so the children could get to their families, and then the families wouldn't be afraid of being prosecuted because some of them were illegal. Unfortunately, that resulted in some horrible things, like some traffickers picked up on this and was like, ooh, well, we can just say we're their uncle because no one's checking IDs. And some people have conflated these two things. They're not the same story, but they are related. And if you're looking at how this law has been enforced and not enforced. And I mean, that was horrible and tragic, and that had to be pulled back. So then it became a bigger burden on HHS to make sure these children were placed somewhere safe. It's a lot of work. That's a lot of budgeting. That's a lot of, and they weren't funded for that because, again, that part of the immigration law and who takes care of what wasn't fucking fixed. It was just passing the buck until like, oh, wow, something bad happened. Okay, so we got to fix this part. And then people started going through like more trouble again because when the story first broke about missing children, like even right before the no tolerance, it was that, oh my God, Health and Human Services lost all these children. Well, it was because they were going ahead and checking IDs. Yes, it's a family member, but then those family members are so scared of getting deported themselves because they weren't all legal. So the children, a lot of them are probably in a safe place with family, but the family moves, hides, doesn't answer the phone, because they're afraid of getting deported, and then the process just gets gummed up and stopped. So the no tolerance policy is unconscionable way to cut through all that because you're hurting people and you're putting children in fucking cages, and then you're lying about how long they're there. And Elizabeth Warren's piece on it broke my heart.
And the fact that there's no mechanism whatsoever to reunite these families, that there are people that are signing over saying, hey, I'm, fine, deport me, but they're still not seeing their kids. And the fact, and I don't know, the last time I checked, we still don't have any videos or pictures of any of the girls. All I have seen, and this is something that's been brought up a couple of times on news reports, is that everything that we see is of the boys' camps. And that's a little scary too. The other thing that was going on, especially with the Obama administration, they were doing this thing that they call catch and release. That was brought up and was like, oh, vilified and stuff like that. The thing is, with that catch and release, 91% of the people made it to their court appearances all the time, or most of the time, was always in contact. That's 91%. So you have a family coming over seeking asylum, which is a topic we'll have to hit in a few minutes, but they're seeking asylum or, whatever, and they're coming over and there's like, okay, where are you going? We're going to Minnesota, let's say. All right, they would give them information of who to contact. Once they got to Minnesota, they would get there and they would contact them in that time that they were requested to contact them. So it was a working program where they didn't have to separate the families, and the children would go off with the parents, and the parents were showing up, and so that is one of those situations where there was something that was taking a bit of the burden off of HHS and all of that stuff, and being effective, and they basically threw it out, and now they're having to get JAG, which should scare people, that they're having military officers have to come down and prosecute these people, because they didn't set up anything for this. They just thought, oh, well, just, this is the zero policy, but they didn't have any detention centers set up, so that, a lot of these kids, like I said, are going into, like, warehouses and stuff like that. There are tent cities that are being created.
Yeah, enforcing it being criminal isn't something that it was set up for. Threaten that, detail that, explain it, fix it, not just bring down the hammer and then people are subject to horror to try and get your way. And the other thing that, oh my God, I was at the gym and they had CNN on and Trump was up there. Instead of having, he never talks from the Oval Office or anything or does any kind of fireside
No.
responsible. He got a bunch of people whose family members were killed by illegal immigrants and presented them as this is who they. Once again, it's all the rapists and killers. Like, no, I'm. That's like you said. Like what? 91% of them are showing up for their court date, and the court date is just for they cross illegal and they're trying to get asylum for fuck's sake from danger, from gangs, from like horrific conditions. If you read those stories, but that's like cherry picking a few to demonize an entire race is disgusting.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean that's what certain people of a certain political ilk that I don't want to use right now on our first podcast. We can move into that one a little bit later, but that's what they do. They demonize a race. They demonize a group of people that are somewhat different than the other individuals. And you know,
Well, it's working and it makes me want to cry.
yes. And here's the thing: Jeff Sessions decided that people that are seeking asylum for domestic abuse or gang violence no longer can use that as an asylum request because it's personal. I'm sorry, it's not personal. Personal is that I don't have money in my bank account. That's personal. Someone threatening your family because you refuse to run drugs for them, or your spouse is beating the snot out of you on a nightly basis, does not compute as personal. That is something that we should be protecting as a society.
It's like the same people who say, why don't you just leave, seem to be the same people who be like, oh my God, how dare they come here?
It's like,
right? Like
yeah.
How not Christian, for instance.
Right. Well, it's like, why don't they leave? They are leaving. You won't let them come. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like be better as people. So it doesn't have to be about politics and religion and what country is what and what race people. Like, can we be decent people? There is a way to be a decent person and work in politics because that's what it's there for. There's some kind of like social contract
Right.
that we participate in to be better as a society.
I mean,
That's what ideally it is.
Yeah, that's what politics is a social contract saying, I will complete my part, I will go to work, I will pay my taxes, I will, vote, and everything else. The social contract is that we have the roads work, and that, we don't like,
Public education?
public education. and,
Street lights? I mean, it affects you.
but the more that they and here's the other thing, and this is something that's been talked about a little bit and stuff like that, but I have met many Hispanic workers who do things that I would never ever want to do as a job, and they do it well, and I don't. Someone brought up the fact, and this. When this first came through, back when Bush was president, and they started another form of zero tolerancy with Bush, or a similar vein, it was Georgia. Georgia did this where you had to, they would check all of the workers before they went out on the farms and stuff, and there was billions of dollars worth of produce that rotted in the field because they didn't have any workers. And that's why, your peaches or your lettuce or your avocados get so expensive. People complain about food prices, but the problem is that when you complain about fruit prices, then you have to accept this as well.
Well, people don't connect those things, which is absurd. I mean, they just are connected.
No, I agree totally with that. Is that they are? There's a disconnect. There has been a disconnect for quite some time about how we as a society work. I took in one of my college courses, we did a immigrants course. And one of the things that we found immigrants are cyclical. This immigrant fight is cyclical. It happens a lot because we were afraid that we're going to lose our identity. Originally, it was the Germans and the Irish that was a problem. Then it was the Italians and the Eastern Europeans. And now it's the Hispanics. The thing is that our society, as it gets older, needs immigration, needs immigrants, because that's how we keep invigorating ourselves. Many of our Nobel Prize winners in science and literature and everything else are immigrants that came after they were born in another country, came here and became American citizens. We have to have that growth as a country. We have plenty of space. Wyoming's practically empty.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just true. It's what makes us us. Everybody talks melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but only some people. Right? Like the Muslim ban.
Yeah.
Holy crap. And then 45 goes on TV saying, see, I was right. I was upheld. I'm completely justified. I always was. But, people weren't paying attention to the fact that he modified that ban over and over and over until the court said, all right, now you're at least not... We can't say it's just a Muslim ban anymore, so we'll let this slide. But it was modified like 6 times, I think, at least. But people don't know that. So they think, see, it's okay to do this, and people will try to use it as a precedent to, unconstitutionally, frankly, ban people by race, which is specifically, that was really early in the Constitution, fairly, that you can't do that. But this one slid by. And that's another, okay, there was a similar ban on similar countries before.
Right. Well, and here's the thing: we have made that mistake before. Back in the 30s, we made that mistake of not accepting Jewish immigrants to come, and there is blood on America's hands for I don't know how many thousands of the millions of Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. But America has a great deal of blood on its hands because they turned ships away over and over again. So we have been down this road before. We will be down this road again, unfortunately, because we keep forgetting our history. Our history says that we've done this before. We have been cruel to another group of people and turned them away from our borders. And by doing that, we have caused irreparable harm in the world. And
the morality of it really comes in for a lot of us bleeding heart liberals.
Yeah.
If you read the whole inscription on the Statue of Liberty, right, go past the "Give me your tired report,"
right,
and read the whole thing. Go Google it. It is. That's what how America inspires the rest of the world, and another part of if you're the religious one going to the faithful morality, there's plenty of material.
Mm-hmm.
And you have stuff about when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat, and those platitudes. But how about just as simple, and if you want to cherry pick, let the children come to me.
Oh yeah.
Right? Why don't these
suffer the children unto me?
People there with their crosses and their flags and screaming and yelling about, well, they just made their own choice and it's their parents' fault and what a horrible thing. They're just horrible people and they shouldn't have come here and they broke the law and so this is what they get. Where's your heart? Well, where's your soul?
You're a parent, so you know this. You would not risk your children over 1,000 miles march in dangerous, unknown wilderness and territory with very little means of food or water or shelter to get to some place without a reason, without a sincere, honest reason. And it's because let's exclude the asylum stuff because we are so breaking our treaties with other countries because of how we're treating asylum seekers right now. Because we're not supposed to prosecute them, and we are. But take aside that. Let's just say they're coming here to find a better life. Why would you turn someone away because they want to find a better life? They don't want to be if you were to ask them, they want to work, they want to do good, they want to help the society. A lot of the immigrants, when they are working, are paying taxes, are working, and they don't get any benefits from it. It's like, well, they'll just clog up our social safety net, which is so full of holes right now. Maybe a little clogging wouldn't be a bad thing. But that being said, they're not going to do that because that would risk them being found out and deported. Well, they're not going to put themselves out like that, but they will pay their taxes because they don't want to get in trouble that way either. And so, they are not getting benefit as far as the social safety net. They will never, if they stay illegal, they'll never get Social Security or Medicare. So,
well, and here's something I'll go ahead and detail because I have experience with. My husband's an immigrant. He's Canadian, so, I guess you don't have to be afraid. Whatever the fuck is wrong with people? I'm sorry. I swear a lot. We're going to have an explicit tag. But this idea that, they just come over here and then they apply for welfare and we're just paying taxes and they get under-table jobs and they don't pay anything and then they're just a drain on the system and they're draining our education. No. You might be able to get them into school. Mm-hmm. Public schools I'm okay with paying my taxes for that, and they can go up a little, and I'm okay with that. I did my husband's immigration proper. I did all the paperwork myself. I was working in legal offices at the time, so I thankfully had the legalese to handle that. I saved us a lot of money. It cost a lot of money. There was like $150 petition so he could go back and forth across the border because he still worked on the other side of the border. There was the initial couple $100 of fees. Then there was a $500 actual visa application after a little while. I had to sponsor him. Sponsorship, you don't get married and you get citizenship. He's still not a citizen. He's been in this country, it's like 17, 18 years, almost 20 years now. And he's still not a citizen. That's a whole other process. That costs a whole other chunk of money we don't have all the time. I had to sign paperwork that for the first 10 years of him being here, I had to support him. He could not apply for any public assistance whatsoever that's subject to deportation. Any criminal offense, you're subject to deportation. Now, you can argue these laws haven't been always enforced, right, obviously, because we don't have the tools, because we can't always find everybody. But, even legally, the process it's daunting, it's expensive. Most people have to hire a lawyer to do it. They don't even have the language skills, let alone the legal prowess to pull it off themselves. That's like a minimum of about $4,000 to maybe get a green card temporarily. So it's not easy, and it's not like, they could have just done it legally when you're in dire straits and when you're just trying to find a better way for your family. I think path to citizenship needs to be figured out, especially in cases of asylum. But for anyone who wants to work within our visa system, because that's another trying to get an employer visa, we've been cutting those. When, I'm sorry, we've been doing a really shitty job in our education system. We're short engineers, we're short programmers in major cities. They can't find people to hire, and then you're cutting the visas to bring them from anywhere else. That's just xenophobic bullshit.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that during all of this, that we decided that we were also going to remove ourselves from the Council of Human Rights and the UN. And it's like, well, that's the next logical step, isn't it, really?
Well, like you said, the way we're treating these immigrants, we're finding attorneys coming forward saying that we are, and legal experts, that we're in violation of Geneva Conventions at this point.
Yeah, we are. Because as part of the Geneva Convention, part of it is asylum seekers, and one of the rules is that you're not allowed to, if they are seeking asylum, you're not supposed to prosecute them for trying to come across the border. And if we're going to talk about legal, and we're going to talk about all of that, the big thing that you have to understand is that it is a misdemeanor. Same kind of misdemeanor as if you get pulled over. Imagine you're on the road, and you're driving home, and you're speeding, people speed, people do, maybe your tag's out or you have a light out or something. You get pulled over by the cops. And instead of him writing you a ticket saying you need to go to court and either pay the fine or show that you've gotten this fixed, they take your children out of your car, put you in one cell, and don't tell you where your kids are. That's basically what the law is. It's a misdemeanor. First time crossing the border is a federal misdemeanor. Jared Kushner has committed felony because of how he handled his paperwork to get his security clearance. But he is still working in the White House, but children are being ripped away from their parents. If you can't prove to me that this is not racially motivated, then it's racially motivated.
It really.
Well,
I mean, like you're saying, like it falls right in lockstep with the profiling cases that have been rampant throughout the Southwest for a number of years now. Yeah. They've picked up people and for speeding or whatever, and then deported them, and they weren't even actually from Mexico or anything. They were from the native in the United States. There's a movie back in the day. It starred Cheech Marin. And it was called East LA. Born in East LA.
Yeah. Where he was picked up because he looked Hispanic, and they took him the other side of the border. And it's his story about getting back, and it's a comedy and everything else. But this is stuff that's actually happening, and a movie by Cheech Marin of Cheech and Chong fame is becoming prophecy. It's a little scary. But that's one of those,
It's because we live in an idiocracy now.
Oh, yeah, there's another prophecy, isn't there? Yeah. Only it's not Terry Crews, because I would prefer President Terry Crews.
Right? I'm okay with him.
Yeah. But the point is that what really started this, we had been talking about this for a little for about a week or so. Then Jeff Sessions came up and quoted Romans 13. And if you read the first part of Romans 13, it talks about how the people who are of the law and stuff like that are ordained by God, and you should do all of the things that they say and stuff like that. But when you get to and I want to say it is verse 8, verse 8 through 12, let me find it. Yes, it is and I will read this verbatim so that you understand, and then I will discuss the first 7 verses of Romans 13 and how it's been used in the past.
And I think this point is relevant, that these same verses were used to justify slavery and Jim Crow laws.
They were. And
so it's an old playbook.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, someone had brought it up, and I hadn't had a chance to check it, but someone brought up that it was the same stuff that Germany used in the 30s too, for the exact same thing. But this is what it says afterward. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves the other has fulfilled the law. The commandment, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, or whatever other commandments there may be, are summed up in this one commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. So the first part has to be read with the second part, which means that sure, these people are supposedly ordained by are ordained to rule by God, but only if they are showing love and compassion. If they're not showing love and compassion, then they're not completing the law, and you don't have to follow it.
Well, it's like a biblical context, because they're using law as people of the law, right? But they're using law in a modern sense and as if it's government, when what the Bible verse he's using is actually addressing is law of love, law of the Spirit,
right.
The law of God in a different, in a context that maybe it crosses in there and a little circumstantial, but wow, no, because you can't leave off that second part. That's pretty.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Paul was very adamant about the fact that you need to love, and there needs to be love in any of the rulings that we're doing. And I'm sorry, there's
Now put the Wiccan thing in. The Wiccan creed being love is the law, love under will.
yeah.
Do harm none, but do as thou will.
Right. And the situation is that we're supposed to love each other. We're supposed to take care of each other. And that's the thing. We're not taking care of each other because everybody wants to be the Trump administration is very nationalistic and sees anybody who is not part of us or part of the United States as the enemy. Not just, people who have traditionally been our enemies, but anyone. So anyone that's crossing our border is an enemy. They don't see them as a neighbor, and that's the problem is that we are neighbors. We are we just because there is a magical line written on a map saying that this is a place between the two doesn't mean that we shouldn't love those people and let those people find happiness. I'm not, by no means am I saying open borders, because a lot of people will accuse me of that. I am not saying open borders, but I am saying that there needs to be some compassion and there needs to be a better system, because our system is really, really broken as far as it's concerned. The EU has a very interesting system of how they work it, and it kind of is open borders in some respects, but you just have to be a member of the EU, and then you can go not only live in one area, but you can also work in one area. Why can't we do that with the Americas? Where we have, you show the ID that you're from Guatemala or Colombia, and you want to work here in the United States. Okay, that's fine. Here you go. There you go. Just let us know you're okay. And because that's what the EU does is that you could be from Lithuania and you can go and work in England, and that's one of the things that they were talking about with Brexit is that all those immigrant workers were going to have to be kicked out, and then there were going to be a massive amount of jobs that weren't fulfilled. So this is not just an American thing, this is a European thing, because they're having to deal with a lot of African refugees, economic refugees and stuff like that. The Catholic Church has really started to ramp up about how the fact that we need to start taking care of economic as well as environmental asylum seekers, because as it gets more and more hot and more where we cannot grow food in certain areas, people are going to have to leave. It's one of the reasons we had the problems with Syria, is because the farmers couldn't grow their food, so they started moving back into the cities, and because of that, there was disquiet about how things were being run, and that's where you started the rebellion. So immigrants have been.
Well, then let's go have bombing runs and then block them from coming here for help when we wreck all their shit. So.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing, and talking about the Muslim ban, because that's what I'm going to call it. The Muslim ban is of 8 countries that not a single terrorist from has done anything in the United States. All right. However, Saudi Arabia, 14 of the 19 terrorists were of 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So, but
who's Syrian?
Who's that?
Steve Jobs. His parents immigrated here.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an Apple guy, I should have known that.
How what terrible people. They never did any good for
I know.
the world.
I know. They didn't invent they didn't, produce the smartphone, And yes, there are other companies that have the smartphone, but it was really Apple that brought it into what we see today. And yeah. Oh no, Steve Jobs. Well, he couldn't have came over. It's like, and there's a lot of immigrants that have come over that are beneficial to our society, and we want to.
Most of us are, unless you're native. Take a breath.
Yeah, that's true.
We're a bunch of genocidal heritage come over here, take shit over, and then every next wave gets persecuted. Let's do better. That's the whole point of the forming the government and the politics. The whole Constitution, there's a lot of shit written in there where we're not supposed to be doing that.
I know. Well, it's like in the 20s and stuff like that when they started putting caps on how many Chinese could come over and how many Japanese could come over and how many Chinese could come over. And that...
and we're not clear of never putting people in camps before either, because we've done that.
No. There was a tweet by George Takei, and he was in a concentration... He was in an internment camp.
Right.
And he said not even then did they separate their children from their parents. So this is like a next step of evil. It's like not only are we interning people, but we're taking their children away and doing I don't know what. That's what scares me, especially with the fact that, as I said earlier, that there's no mechanism for getting these parents and children back together. There's no cases being handed out or anything like that. They are basically in
and lying to them.
Oh, yeah.
The whole icebox thing?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's just really cold in this detention center, so while we process you, we're going to take your baby to keep, them warm, and then they never see them again.
Or take them to the bathroom.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Or taking them we're going to take them to the bathroom, and it's like, no. And here's the thing. The executive order that they passed that was trumpeted. Oh, he's backing down on that. No, he's not, because there was a story that came out on a NewsHour on PBS where this grandmother had paperwork showing she was the legal guardian of this daughter. They went to the border. They was like, okay, we'll take them over, do all this kind of stuff. They take them to the detention center because they're trying to find the other family and stuff. And then they separated the grandmother from the mother, from the daughter, or granddaughter, I should say. So it's not happening at the border, but it's still happening. That executive order has a lot of openings to where they can easily still take those children away. It's just now it's not at the border where it can be seen by everybody.
He's using it. It's the worst of politics. I love politics, and I kept working really hard for a long time to make the world better. But this kind of bullshit, 45, you can roll back and just say, okay, no zero tolerance anymore, and prioritize getting these people processed the way it was being done so that people aren't separated. Roll that back, but no, it's being leveraged to try and force a vote on an immigration bill that has the wall funding in it.
Oh, and it failed.
I know. But he's still that's what it's for. It's leverage.
Well, and a lot of people in his White House see this as a good thing because they think this is going to be a wedge issue for the midterm.
Look, we passed an immigration bill that no one could do it for 50 years, and we're great. But at what cost?
Yeah.
Like, y'all sold your soul.
Well, and again, they didn't even get it passed, and now they're hoping to use that as a wedge issue in November.
Yeah, well, and under Hitler, the trains ran on time.
Yeah.
I never pulled the Hitler, but I mean...
I see, I was trying to avoid the F word myself, It's like trying to not use it right on our first podcast, but yeah, this is fascist uses people to make wedge issues, to force people into seeing themselves as better or that the other is the problem. And that's not healthy. That's not good. That's because it's at that point, once you've played that card, which the Trump administration has been playing since And here's the thing. We knew this was going to happen. People were like, oh, I didn't believe he would do this kind of stuff. We knew it as soon as he came down the escalator, and the first words out of his mouth is like, Mexico is sending their worst to us. We knew what he was going to be about, and immigration was going to be his big milestone. Immigration was going to be the thing that he was going to hang his hat on. And I knew it was going to be bad, and I'll be perfectly honest. I didn't think it would be like, this bad, but I knew it was going to be bad. But, separating children, and the thing is, they want this as a wedge issue in the election because they're going to say that people are not, that the Democratic Party or the liberal that you may be voting for wants open borders. And we don't want open borders. We just want sensible laws. And we want sensibility. And we want respect. These are human beings. These are not, they call it an infestation. And an infestation, that means they're bugs. That's how they view them. And if you're viewing people as something less than human, then you will do cruel things to them, just as the hundreds of thousands of people that we enslaved.
It wasn't. It was the North Korean leaders calling their people rats.
Yes.
Yeah, buddies now. I rankle at the use of the term illegals too, really badly. It's demeaning and disgusting and assumptive. It's racist. I know you don't fucking think you're racist because, sorry, I'm not. Well, technically they have not emigrated legally, so they're illegals. No, they did something illegal. It doesn't make them illegals.
Right.
Like, are you an illegal because you jaywalked yesterday, right? And it rankles me in particular because of like a personal, I was a mother out of wedlock. My oldest boy. I was a single mom for a number of years, and I published a local little newspaper for a bunch of pagans, and that's nice because I got to have a birth announcement because the local newspaper, the Buffalo News, wouldn't publish any birth announcements for single mothers.
You were kidding me.
And I was like, wait, what? I had heard it, and then I looked in the paper and no birth announcements, even though hospitals send this stuff out. And I asked, and they were like, well, no, we don't do that. And I kind of lost my shit because that's that whole illegitimate. Mm-hmm. So what? He's not legitimately a person? Is that why calling a child illegitimate makes me very angry, and I have the same visceral reaction to calling someone an illegal. The
right,
kind of labeling and the unfair and the classist bullshit that it is just, and rights as a woman. Right, I'm glad I'm not property anymore. I'm a white lady, so at least when I get pulled over, they don't pull me out and beat me up, and they don't call every cop car in town like happens down the street every day.
Yeah.
But so I recognize my privilege, but I can empathize.
Well, I mean, just because you have privilege because you're white, but you're still a woman, and that's a topic for another day. But it will come. It will come. But
we got a list, folks. We've got. Let me see. The immigration. We got racism coming up. Definitely want to have a guest for that. I have some ideas about some fantastic guests. I went to the barbershop today, but Xavier wasn't in. Wage disparity, Me Too movement, LGBTQ plus issues.
The last I saw, it was LGBTQIA. Has they added something to that since then?
Well, you have to have two Qs.
Okay.
And
I'm sure
two A's and
two A's.
There's two A's.
And I'm sure that's
I think
helpful.
there's two I's. QQIIAA.
And
plus.
And I'm sure that's very helpful when you're trying to have a group on campus that is taxes and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a whole long discussion I'm willing to have, and I had recently, and got accused of trying to erase people. We'll talk about it another time. I'll tell you about it after this. Because that was something. I also got blocked by someone this week over transgender science.
Right.
Yeah, that was fun. I took screenshots.
So here's something else, just so that you can keep in mind while you're watching and stuff like that. If you're angry about this issue, if you want to get your voice heard, remember that Donald Trump can't block you on Twitter. By law, he is not allowed to block you on Twitter. So go at it. I believe that's what I think we're going to end right here with the last part of this, and then we have a couple other quick segments, but. It's okay to shame the people who are in the administration, and I feel it's perfectly okay.
That's what you sign up for.
Yeah, and especially if you're going to sit there.
You be a public servant. That's what you sign up for.
And if you're going to sit there and then you're going to lie to us and everything else, and you're going to be the face of a movement where you're removing children from their parents. And here's the thing, and this is... People talk about, these kids, they're nothing but M13 or whatever, the 13, the gang. I apologize, I don't know the gang. This is how you create them, because you make them so angry, and these kids so angry that, everything else. That, or you could treat these children with respect, give them a chance to make it in the world, and then they won't feel hopeless and end up on a gang. But yeah, shame. If you see Sarah Huckabee out there trying to get a cheeseburger, shame her.
I guess.
I believe in public shaming. I believe if you're going to... And I know that opens the floodgates for people who are going to shame me or shame my views. But on the same thing, I've decided to open myself up to that, and I'm okay with that, because this is how I believe. And if you can't stand up to your belief, and if you can't stand up for that, I mean, when you are separating families, and then you go to a Mexican restaurant to enjoy the culture of the people that you are repressing, that deserves a lot of it. And I'm not asking, All
right, I agree, but I think. For me, there is a priority in civility. It is perfectly fine for a business to refuse service to somebody for whatever reason they want. Retaliation should be, there are two sides of the argument. Mm-hmm. Like, I have no problem shaming businesses locally that, I'll go in so what's your restaurant policy? My friend's transgender, can they use the gender of choice? And... that they identify with. And if they say no, I'm like, I'm leaving, and I'm telling everybody, and everybody can vote with their dollars.
Well, that's right? What I do with, if I'm going to a cake bakery or stuff like that. Is like, I'm planning a gay wedding. Will you make the cake? And if they say no, it's like, okay, and I'm going to tell everybody else.
But I wouldn't go as far as making up lies to do it, because I don't lie. But and filter that way. I just ask them. But the other... Then people who wanted civility. Be civil. Just be civil. Were outside that restaurant. And they were throwing chicken shit at people patronizing the restaurant over what happened.
Yeah.
Because the owner was not civil and just saying, I don't want to serve you in my establishment, and then somehow the civil reaction is throwing shit at people? What are you... How is this the right wing, the conservative...
The moral majority?
No, that's crazy.
I know.
You would never find gay men standing outside a bakery throwing chicken shit for nothing.
I don't even think they throw chicken shit, period, just to be perfectly honest.
Right, but I mean, no. And it's funny, somebody pointed out recently, they were calling for civility. Biden got refused service back some years ago.
Oh, really? For
yeah,
what?
I came across that service, or that story a little while ago, and I think it was a bakery thing, but they refused Biden service.
Well, and here's the thing: Sanders, she didn't tweet it out on her personal. She tweeted out on her on the White House, and that's.
Oh, see, this is another. I didn't address that last week on Geek Girls. We talked about tech and legislation catching up, and social media needs a lot of that worked out. Like Trump, he's in the White House and his businesses, and he's talking about them at a diplomatic event. Like,
Yeah. No,
yes, that is against campaign finance law. Why isn't this being dealt with? Loopholes, social media, saying things, and then it not being. I mean, that's really on the fucking record.
Right.
At that point, and he can enact policy that way, but then he's not responsible for what he said.
Yeah, no. You can't do it both ways. That's why they made it illegal for him to block people, because obviously he is, and once he gets out of office, which I hope is in 2 more years, if not sooner, because of being impeached,
or binge drinking on the toilet while he tweets. Sorry,
what?
I said out loud.
I thought he was.
Seems like the only explanation sometimes. I mean, Kafifi.
But he says he doesn't do drugs or drink.
Nope. Just lots of coffee.
Whatever. Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't even have that discussion right now of that.
So I will, in our show notes, when I manage to get the feed going, I'll put this right away by tomorrow on our blog. We do have a WordPress site set up at Heresy and Hearsay at WordPress. Sorry about that noise if you heard it. I'll get the links up of some things that we referenced today. Articles, Rachel Maddow crying, that kind of thing. And then hopefully this will be published soon to iTunes. I am waiting for the wonderful Sarah Next to finish our logo. When I get to the carrot and stick.
Yeah. One other thing, we'll also publish some of not only the Bible verses we discussed, but we'll also be publishing some of the other ones and a reference to where you can look them up and use them in an intelligent conversation about this topic.
Okay, well, you make that document and I'll post it. Don't give me more work. I'm doing.
I will work on that tomorrow. I promise.
Okay.
All right. I will get that emailed out to you.
So, carrot and stick is something we decided we wanted to do.
Carrot and stick basically is that we're going to highlight someone who has done good in politics, and then we're going to also point out someone who is doing bad. These, we hope, and we're going to do our best to try to where it's not one-sided on a political spectrum. It may end up being that way, but
whatever we come up with. And this was really last minute. I mean, the idea we talked about last week was Barney wanted to just poke a stick at somebody, and I said, "Can we at least find somebody doing something good in politics too?"
And I'm like, you know what? We should be somewhat. We should end up on a positive. So let's do the stick first, and then we'll do the carrot stick. So the stick is, why is Justice Kennedy resigning now? Has he not seen the nation on fire? I'm just, we're kind of, we're on fire right now.
Yeah. I mean, it seems super bad timing. I mean, I think that perhaps the notorious RBG would have resigned if they weren't already blocking all of Obama's.
Yeah. And
she knew damn well they were not going to let her be replaced, and I think she's sticking it out. I mean, and why isn't Kennedy sticking it out? Kennedy has not been consistently left or right, but he has. His rulings fall as judicial readings. Like if you ever read, which I do, big nerd, I will sometimes just read their findings, right? And the reports all the justices give their opinions when they make a ruling. And he's fallen really left in favor of LGBTQ issues and some other things in the past. And then he's gone really right, like restricting voting rights, like that recent case in Ohio where they're scrubbing rolls, and that's not good. And the racial redistricting, just kind of passing the buck on that.
Yeah.
But there's a pretty good balance of rulings where you can look at it and look at his opinions where, like, he's doing his job. He's picking it apart. He's looking at the precedents. He's looking at the Constitution. He's looking at actual interpretation and making the best judgments he can.
Right.
And Trump has, it was part of his campaign.
Yeah.
I'm going to appoint the most conservative judges I can, even though the Republicans for years have been railing against judicial activism. Because when anything happens they don't like, it's some activist. And judges should not be activists.
No, they shouldn't. I read a tweet of a friend of mine who said it's like all the stem cells I have, healthy stem cells I have, I donate to Justice Ginsburg, because we need her to stay around at least until, the midterms, otherwise, here's the thing, right now the court is not going to shift too dramatically. It will shift some, don't get me wrong, because a lot of the in-between stuff is going to fall away, but it's still going to be a 5-4 court. The thing is that if we lose one of the liberal judges, that is where the shift comes, and they are putting people in that are 40 and 50 years old, so they're at least a generation or two in that role, and that can be very scary.
But like losing someone in the middle,
right?
That you're gonna get replaced with somebody who's not.
Oh yeah,
it seems irresponsible to the position.
It does. And we don't know the whole story. It may be health issues that he doesn't feel that way.
Maybe.
But on the other hand, I would, if it was me and I saw the dumpster fire of that's currently going on, I would probably stick it out at least another year and see what happens after the midterms. After the midterms, if America decides that they're going to continue down this path, what can you do? So that's kind of our hope is that we help educate the individuals listening, that we make them understand the reasons why these arguments are not truly sound and based in true theology, that it's being nitpicked and pulled out to be hateful. So what we're going to do is you can contact us with your opinions, the input here. I'm sorry. Thank you. I
forgot the carrot.
I did. I keep wanting to poke.
There is hope. We're trying to we want civil discussion among everybody, and it's possible to have these discussions, even politics and religion in the same context, and not be a lunatic. So the carrot this week, I thought this was quite wonderful. Interesting. So I'll post this article from thecut.com, but the name everybody's heard is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's a really shocking Democratic primary upset. Excuse me. She's 20 years old, Bronx-born Democratic socialist, political newcomer, ran unabashedly further left than her 10-term incumbent, and it worked. And she spent less than $200,000, I think, and he spent millions in the last month just trying to make it stop. So this article has 4 more progressive women's campaigns that should be watched. It was really interesting to see the news stations talking about this and the Democratic Party. Weird reactions it's just one district, and then the party going no man, we're the Big Ten, and the opinions I was reading today y'all better pay attention to these progressive millennials or get used to using.
Yeah.
So all the kudos in the world, all the carrots for young people who want to run for office. Mm-hmm. Do it. We just watched in horror as Congress talked to Zuckerberg and had to waste way too much time explaining how the internet works. Okay? Holy crap. Can we get some people? I'm 49 years old, and I would be younger than almost all of Congress, and I've been in politics. No. Get involved younger, stay involved. I know it's daunting because of money, but ideas are powerful in this new generation of social media, and it's working, and a movement can actually happen. God's sake, Obama did it.
Right.
We've seen it happen nationwide. If you want to make a difference, no matter what side you're on, step up, show up, put yourself on the line, run for office, carrots for you.
Yes. And I want to add to that, do it at the local level, do it at your school board, do it at
So you can learn the ropes.
Well, not only just that, but that is where a lot of these races first start, and a lot of these races, and that's where you get decisions that affect your children, that affect your lives individually. And you don't, everybody talks about the national and about the state, but you also have to look at the local, and the local is just as important.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, it was something I brought to the Democratic Party here locally some years ago. I'd like us to be taking more initiative because we train candidates and stuff. Training people to get on the boards of businesses. We have energy co-ops.
Right.
Agricultural co-ops. That can be incredibly invaluable learning experience for what the actual issues are in your community, different parts of it, and learning to solve those problems. And then the Chamber of Commerce knows who you are. I mean, it's political power within your community that you can just take hold of by showing up for a few meetings here or there a month in a place that interests you.
So, you want to do the wrap up now?
Sure.
Seeing I stepped all over it originally. I understand this is my first podcast, so please, that's why I have like a pro next to me. So you can contact us at heresyandhearsay@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at heresyandhears1, or you can give us a call at 980-858-2243, and we'll be happy to listen to those voicemails. We plan on recording on Thursdays on a weekly basis. Join us on Twitch TV /9of12. 12 is 9 is spelled out, but 12 is numeric.
Nineof12.
And follow the channel today, and you'll be notified of when we go on air. Just as a reminder, we are going to be working on getting a Patreon. Just $1 will help us with our costs, and there are costs involved, even in just getting started. So we would be grateful for anything that you can support, and we hopefully will have that up in a couple of days. To next week at the latest, would you say? Would that work? Will we be able to do it then?
Yeah.
Okay. By next week, we'll have it up. We'll tweet it out. We'll also put it on the channel and on the website. And we'll also be tweeting it out. You can also follow me at SethRothII on Twitter.
I can be followed at 9of12. Again, it's Nineof12.
And we appreciate you listening. And we will see you again next time when we discuss about religion and politics.
Until then, bless your heart.